PSO J318. This is the most famous homeless world we know of, and the only reason we can see it at all is that it is young. It sits about 80 light-years away and carries roughly 8 times the mass of Jupiter. It was found in 2013, and it was found by accident because a survey looking for failed stars flagged something whose colors did not match anything in the catalog. It was too red and too faint to be a star and too isolated to be a planet because there was no star anywhere near it to orbit. What made it possible to pin down was its neighborhood. The object belongs to a loose association of young stars that all formed together, and knowing that gave astronomers its age, roughly 23 million years old. That number is the important one. A planet is born hot, and this one has not had time to cool down yet, so it is still glowing faintly with the heat of its own formation. It is not reflecting anything because there is nothing to reflect. It is burning off the last warmth of being born, and in 2015, astronomers did something remarkable with that faint glow. They watched it for hours as it rotated and tracked how its brightness flickered. And from that, they built a weather report. The object is wrapped in layers of thick and thin cloud, and inside those clouds, the temperature runs past 800 degrees Celsius. Some researchers have argued that what falls as rain there is molten metal. So there is a weather map for a world where it has never once been day. No sunrise and no seasons and no shadows, just permanent night, with hot metal clouds moving across a sky nobody will ever stand under. WISE 0855. And now the uncomfortable part. That first one is 80 light-years away, which feels safely distant. This one is about 7¼ light-years from Earth. To put that in order, the only things closer to us are Alpha Centauri, Barnard's star, and a pair of brown dwarfs called Lumen 16. That makes this the 4th closest system to the Sun. Not the 4th closest rogue world, the 4th closest anything. And nobody knew it was there until 2014. The astronomer Kevin Luhman found it by comparing infrared images taken months apart and noticing that one faint smudge had shifted position against the background. That motion is the giveaway. Distant things do not move, and things that move are close. The same astronomer had found the 3rd closest system the year before, which means one man quietly filled in 2 of the nearest slots on the map of our own neighborhood within about a year. And this object is the coldest of its kind ever found outside the solar system, sitting somewhere around -13 to -48 degrees Celsius. That is not star cold. That is Arctic cold. At that temperature, something strange becomes possible. When astronomers took its spectrum, they found evidence of water clouds, actual clouds of water in the atmosphere of a world with no sun. It might rain there, not molten glass and not liquid iron, just water falling through permanent darkness a little over 7 light-years from where you're sitting. SIMP J0136. This one has a light show. It is a borderline object sitting right on the line between a very large planet and a very small failed star, and the current estimate puts it around 12 or 13 times the mass of Jupiter. Whether you file it as a planet or a brown dwarf is a genuine argument, and the answer changes depending on which threshold you use. But that is not what makes it disturbing. In 2018, astronomers pointed a radio telescope array at it and picked up a signal. That was the first time anyone had ever detected radio emission from an object in this mass range beyond our solar system, and it let them measure something nobody had measured before. Its magnetic field is more than 200 times stronger than Jupiter's, roughly 13,000 times stronger than Earth's. A magnetic field that violent, interacting with charged particles, produces auroras. On Earth, the northern lights happen because our magnetic field catches the wind blowing off the sun. This object has no sun. Something else entirely is powering that light show, and the leading idea involves a moon or a companion feeding material into the field. So, somewhere out there is a dark world with no star, and it has aurorae blazing over its poles anyway. And that detection opened a door. If these worlds shout in radio, then radio telescopes become a way to find the ones that are far too cold and far too dark to see any other way. OTS 44. Here is where it stops being about lonely objects and starts being about something building. OTS 44 sits about 550 light-years away and weighs roughly 11 times Jupiter. It should be a dead end. Instead, when astronomers look closely, they found it has a disk, a flat rotating ring of dust and gas circling it, containing at least 10 Earth masses of material. That is not a leftover smear. That is a construction site. The same kind of disk that built every planet in our solar system is currently orbiting an object that has no star of its own, and it is still gathering. Measurements show material falling inward and feeding it exactly the way a young star pulls in its own disk. 10 Earth masses is more than enough raw material to build a family of moons, or something bigger. So here is what that means. A world with no sun is quietly assembling its own system out in the dark. If anything forms in that disk, it will orbit a planet that orbits nothing, in an arrangement with no light source at the center of it whatsoever. 2M A SSJ1115. And OTS-44 is not a one-off. This is a young, isolated body of somewhere between 7 and 21 Jupiter masses, and it is doing exactly the same thing. In 2024, a team confirmed the mechanism. They watched the light coming off it and found the signature of magnetospheric accretion, which is the process where material gets channeled down magnetic field lines and slams into the surface at speed. That is not a slow leftover process. That is a world being actively fed right now by a disk it has no business having. The thing sits roughly 150 light-years away. It is somewhere between 5 and 45 million years old, which by cosmic standards is an infant, so we are watching it happen live. Not the fossil of a system that used to form, but the formation itself happening around an object attached to nothing. CHA 110913. 3 objects, same behavior, and this is the one that got called a miniature solar system without a sun. It weighs about 8 times Jupiter and sits roughly 500 light-years away in the constellation Chameleon. It too has a disk of dust and gas around it. When astronomers modeled what would happen if that disk did what disks normally do, the answer was almost funny. You would get a system that looks like a scale model of ours. A central object with planets forming around it and orbits in the right proportions, all of it roughly 100 times smaller than the real thing. A complete solar system in miniature, with a hole where the star should be. 3 separate objects have now shown us the same thing, which kills a very old assumption. We used to think you needed a star to build a system. You do not. You just need matter and time and gravity, and the galaxy has plenty of all 3. And later on, there is a discovery so strange that some astronomers now argue it never happened at all. We will get there. OGLE 2016. Everything so far has been visible because it was young and hot, but most rogue planets are old and cold and give off nothing at all, which makes them completely invisible. There is only one way to catch those. You wait for one to pass directly in front of a distant star, and for a few moments its gravity bends and magnifies that star's light like a lens. Then you catch the flicker. In 2020, astronomers announced the shortest such flicker ever recorded. The whole event lasted about 41.5 minutes. From that flash, they calculated that the invisible thing in the middle was somewhere between the mass of Mars and the mass of Earth, which made it the first terrestrial mass rogue planet candidate anyone had ever found. And then it was gone. This is the part that gets under my skin. 2 objects lining up that precisely across the galaxy is a coincidence that will not happen twice. The odds of the same alignment recurring are effectively 0, which means that flicker is not the first observation of that world. It is the only one there will ever be. It is out there right now, a rocky world the size of ours, or smaller, moving through the dark. And our entire record of it is 41 minutes of a star looking slightly too bright, MOA 9Y. Then, in 2023, a team combing back through 9 years of archived survey data found a shorter one, 23 minutes. That is the entire observational history of that world. 23 minutes of a background star flickering, and from that an estimated mass of around 3/4 of the Earth, smaller than our own planet, and unbound and unlit and unrepeatable. Notice where it was found. Not in new observations, but in old data that had already been recorded and stored and set aside years earlier. The event had been sitting in the archive the whole time, waiting for someone to look, and it is only the second terrestrial mass, free-floating planet candidate ever identified which matters more than finding the first. 1 is an anomaly. 2 is the beginning of a population. These are simply the 2 that happen to line up perfectly with a background star during the few decades we have been paying attention. Every other Earth-sized rogue in the galaxy has passed by unseen because nothing was behind it at the right moment. WISE 1534. This one is nicknamed the Accident, and it earned the name. It was not found by an observatory or a survey team. It was found by a man named Dan Caseldon, a security researcher by trade and a volunteer on a public project where ordinary people sift through infrared images looking for objects that move. He had built his own software tools to visualize the data, and this thing turned up sideways while he was hunting for something else entirely. It sits about 50 light-years away, and it does not fit anything. In some wavelengths, it looks extremely cold and therefore very old. In others, it is far too bright for that. And it is moving at more than 200 kilometers per second, which is dramatically faster than anything comparable near us. Objects do not reach that speed by drifting, something through it. The leading interpretation now is that this is not an ejected planet at all, but an extremely ancient object, possibly 10 to 13 billion years old, formed back when the galaxy had barely manufactured any carbon yet. If that is right, it is not a runaway world. It is a relic from the first generation of things that could form at all. The honest status is that the question is still open, and the object is too faint for the instruments that would settle it. A hobbyist with a laptop found something the professionals still cannot classify, S. Ori 70. Now the doubt turns on us. In the Sigma Orionis cluster, astronomers found a very faint and very cool object with an estimated mass of only a few times Jupiter. That would make it one of the smallest free-floating worlds ever identified. And then the argument started. Because its properties were calculated on the assumption that it belongs to that cluster, and therefore sits at the cluster's distance and shares the cluster's age. One team argued it does not. Their case was that it is a foreground brown dwarf, unrelated to the cluster, sitting much closer to us and merely lined up in the same direction from our angle. If that is true, then every number attached to it collapses. Its mass and its age and its status as a record breaker, all of it evaporates. Other teams pushed back and argued that its atmosphere shows the low gravity you would expect from a genuine young cluster member. 2 decades later, the case is still open. This one is a reminder that in this field, a discovery can quietly turn out to be nothing more than a coincidence of alignment. The Jumbos. In 2023, a JWST survey of the Orion Nebula produced a result that broke the models. Astronomers Samuel Pearson and Mark McCaughrean reported 40 pairs of Jupiter mass objects, not single rogue worlds, but pairs, orbiting each other with no star anywhere in the arrangement. They named them JUMBOs, for Jupiter Mass Binary Objects. Nothing in our understanding produces that. Objects that light cannot form the way stars do at that mass, and if they were ejected from a solar system, then the violence required to throw a planet out should shred a loosely bound pair rather than leave the two of them politely circling one another all the way into interstellar space. Then came the pushback. In 2024, the astronomer Kevin Luhman reanalyzed the data and argued that a large fraction of these are not planets at all. His case is that they are background stars reddened by dust, only appearing to sit together from our angle. Other work has since found a radio counterpart for one of them, which cuts the other way. The debate is genuinely live, and it is not settled. Either our models of how planets form have a serious gap in them, or one of the strangest results of the JWST era is an artifact of dust. The crowds. And here's the thing that reframes everything before it. We are not really finding individual rogue planets anymore. We are finding flocks. In December 2021, a survey of the Upper Scorpius star-forming region reported somewhere between 70 and 170 free-floating planetary mass objects in that one region alone. That single result nearly doubled the number known across the entire sky. 2 years later, that JWST survey of the Inner Orion Nebula cataloged around 540 planetary mass candidates in a patch of sky about 1 parsec across. Some of them come in under a single Jupiter mass. These are not rare accidents. They are turning up in bulk everywhere we point a sensitive enough instrument, which suggests they are a standard product of star formation rather than an occasional failure of it. And the current estimates run further than that. Unbound worlds may well outnumber the stars in our galaxy, possibly by a wide margin, which would make the most common kind of world in the Milky Way one, with no sun, no daylight, and no name. Cha 1107, and this field is still moving under our feet. In 2025, one of these worlds did something nobody was expecting. It is a young object of about 5 to 10 Jupiter masses, sitting roughly 620 light-years away, and like several others on this list, it has a disk. Astronomers had been observing it on and off for years, which meant they had a baseline to compare against. Then they looked again in the summer of 2025, and the numbers had moved. The planet was pulling in material around 8 times faster than it had been only a few months earlier. At the peak of that burst, it was swallowing roughly 6 billion tons of gas and dust every second. And that is not just the fastest growth ever recorded for a rogue planet, it is the fastest growth rate ever measured for a planet of any kind, anywhere, and it is happening on a world with no star to light it. The same observations found signs that its magnetic field was steering the infall, and that the chemistry of the disk shifted while the burst was underway. That is behavior we normally associate with young stars, not planets. The closer we look at these things, the blurrier that line gets. CFBDSIR 2149, and the field moves in the other direction too. When this object was announced in 2012, it was celebrated as one of the best free-floating planet candidates anyone had found, with an estimated mass of 4 to 7 times Jupiter. That number rested on a single assumption. The Discovery team calculated an 87% probability that it belonged to a young group of stars called AB Doradus, and belonging to that group handed it an age and a distance. Age and distance are exactly what you need to turn a brightness into a mass. Then better measurements arrived. Later analysis of its motion and its parallax ruled out membership of AB Doradus and of every other known young group as well. The anchor was gone. Without an age, the mass estimate falls apart, and the current position is that this object is either a young planetary mass world of 2 to 13 Jupiter masses, or a brown dwarf of up to 40. That range is not a measurement. That is the honest width of our ignorance about something we have been studying for over a decade. Think about what all of this does to the picture in your head. We map the galaxy by its stars, because stars are the only things bright enough to map, but the actual majority of worlds out there are drifting in permanent darkness between them. And our entire catalog of that majority is a handful of young ones still glowing from birth and a few dozen flickers lasting less than an hour. There are trillions of these places, and no human being will ever stand on a single one of them. In fact, only 12 human beings have ever stood on any world other than this one. If you made it to the end, comment 540 so I know you counted the crowd with me, and those 12 came home to lives that no longer fit. Every man who walked on the moon explained, "It is on your screen. I will see you there."